The sanctuary in Raleigh, North Carolina was glowing with celebration. White roses framed the altar, the choir hummed softly behind the pulpit. Church mothers fanned themselves in the front row, whispering about how beautiful the bride looked. Fried chicken, rice, and greens were already waiting in aluminum trays in the fellowship hall downstairs. Naomi Brooks stood at the altar in a cream-colored gown, shoulders straight, chin lifted. She was educated, accomplished, and confident, the kind of woman who built her own career in Charlotte and never apologized for having opinions. To some, that made her impressive. To Mrs. Vanessa Carter, it made her dangerous. Vanessa sat stiffly in the second pew, hat angled perfectly, lips pressed thin. She had prayed for her son Jalen's wife for years, but she had prayed for a woman who would blend into the Carter family, not challenge it. Naomi did not blend. The pastor smiled warmly. "If anyone objects to this union, speak now or forever hold your peace." The words floated gently at first. Then Vanessa stood. Not slowly, not reluctantly, but with purpose. Gasps rippled through the sanctuary, like wind through tall grass. "I object," she said, voice clear and steady. "This woman is not prepared to be a Carter wife. She is too proud, too independent. Marriage requires submission and order." The room froze. Naomi's bouquet trembled in her hands, but she did not cry. Not yet. Her eyes searched Jalen's face, waiting for him to speak, waiting for him to choose. He swallowed. He looked at his mother. He looked at the floor, and he said nothing. A man who avoids conflict does not avoid consequences. He simply chooses who will suffer quietly. Naomi felt the humiliation settle over her shoulders like a heavy shawl. Every whisper in the church pressed against her skin. The wedding that was supposed to unite two families had become a public trial. Vanessa continued, cloaking control in scripture. "Marriage is spiritual. It is about structure, and I cannot stand by while my son walks into something misaligned." Misaligned, as if Naomi were a crooked picture on a wall Vanessa intended to straighten. Naomi slowly removed the ring from her finger. Tears welled up, spilling like water from a cracked pipe, but her back remained straight. Dignity is sometimes the only armor left. She turned to Jalen one last time. "If you can't speak for us now," she said softly, "you never will." Then she walked down the aisle alone, the same aisle she was supposed to walk down in joy. The church doors closed behind her, and in that moment, Vanessa believed she had protected her son. But protection rooted in control is not protection. It is the first crack in a foundation that will not hold. The church emptied in fragments. Clusters of whispers gathered in the parking lot. Church mothers shook their heads. Some blamed Naomi's modern ways. Others quietly questioned why a grown man could not defend his bride. Inside the sanctuary, the white roses still stood. The altar still glowed, but celebration had drained out of the room like water from an unplugged tub. Jalen remained near the pulpit, staring at the space where Naomi had stood. Vanessa approached him, heels clicking softly against the tile. "I did what had to be done," she said, adjusting her hat as if she had corrected a minor inconvenience. "You'll thank me later." Jalen's jaw tightened. "You embarrassed her. You embarrassed me." Vanessa's voice softened, syrup sweet but firm. "No, son, I saved you. That girl would have run your household instead of honoring it." There it was again, honor disguised as hierarchy. Jalen did not argue, not because he agreed, but because arguing with his mother felt like betrayal. He had been raised to respect her voice, raised to believe that a quiet man was a strong man. But silence is not strength. Silence is a decision, and that decision had already cost him something he might never recover. Across town, Naomi sat in her car outside her apartment complex in Charlotte. Her wedding dress pooled around her like a reminder she could not escape. Her hands gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned pale. She replayed the moment again and again. Vanessa standing, the gasps, Jalen's silence. It wasn't the objection that shattered her. It was the quiet. Tears flowed freely now, like water rushing from a broken pipe, unstoppable and loud. But even in her pain, clarity began to settle. If a man cannot defend you in front of a crowd, he will not defend you behind closed doors. That realization cut deeper than Vanessa's words. Back in Raleigh, Vanessa called relatives that evening. It was unfortunate, but the Lord revealed what needed to be revealed. Some agreed, some stayed quiet, but peace did not settle in the Carter household. It hovered outside like a storm refusing to pass. Jalen lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling. He told himself he would fix it. He told himself he would call Naomi tomorrow. But here is another lesson. Delay is often cowardice wearing patience as a disguise. The next morning came, and instead of reconciliation, there was distance. Instead of courage, there was hesitation. Instead of love defended, there was love abandoned. The wedding ended in one moment, but the consequences were just beginning. 6 months passed, and silence settled over the Carter household like dust on unused furniture. Naomi had not called. Jalen had not gone after her. And Vanessa took that quiet as confirmation that she had done the right thing, because when pride wants to feel justified, it interprets absence as approval. One Sunday afternoon after service, Vanessa introduced someone new. Her name was Keisha Daniels. She wore a soft lavender dress that brushed her calves and a pearl necklace that rested perfectly at her collarbone. Her Bible was tucked neatly under her arm, corners worn just enough to suggest devotion. When she spoke, her voice dripped gentle sweetness, smooth like syrup poured slowly over warm bread. "Miss Vanessa speaks so highly of you, Jalen," Keisha said, lowering her eyes modestly. "A strong man needs a strong foundation." Vanessa beamed. There it was, respect, deference, agreement, all the things Naomi had refused to perform. Within weeks, Keisha was attending Sunday dinners. She complimented Vanessa's cooking. She asked for recipes. She laughed softly at stories she had clearly heard before. She called Vanessa Mama before anyone corrected her. And here is a truth many learn too late. Flattery is often the first brick laid in a house of manipulation. Jalen noticed how quickly things were moving, but after the public collapse of his first wedding, he was tired. Tired of tension, tired of choosing sides, tired of feeling like he had failed everyone. Keisha felt peaceful, or at least she appeared that way, and peace, even artificial peace, can feel irresistible after chaos. Vanessa praised her openly. "This is what a wife looks like," she told the church mothers. "Soft spirit, family-minded, proper." The word proper echoed through the sanctuary halls. Proper didn't question. Proper didn't challenge. Proper didn't require a man to grow a backbone. Proper fit neatly inside Vanessa's expectations. Engagement came quickly. The ring was smaller than Naomi's had been, but the approval was louder. At the small engagement dinner, Keisha stood and offered prayer. "Lord, thank you for restoring what was almost lost. Thank you for placing me exactly where I belong." The words sounded holy, but something about them lingered in the air longer than they should have, because restoration built on replacement is not healing, it is rearrangement. Vanessa ignored the faint discomfort in her chest. After all, this was the answer to her prayers, or so she believed. And sometimes the most dangerous prayer is the one God allows you to have, just to show you why you should have asked for wisdom instead. The second wedding did not carry the same grandeur as the first. There were fewer flowers, fewer guests, fewer whispers of anticipation. But there was something else filling the sanctuary that day. Relief. Relief that there would be no objections. Relief that the Carter name would not be publicly questioned again. Relief that things felt orderly. Keisha walked down the aisle in ivory lace, veil pinned carefully into a sleek bun. Her steps were measured, graceful, deliberate. She did not radiate bold confidence like Naomi once had. She radiated softness, or what looked like it. Vanessa sat proudly in the front pew, hands folded neatly in her lap, chin lifted in satisfaction. This was how it was supposed to be. No disruption, no challenge, no public embarrassment. The pastor's voice echoed warmly. Marriage is a covenant, a spiritual alignment. Vanessa nodded vigorously. Alignment. Yes, that was the word she liked. When the pastor asked the familiar question, if anyone objects, the sanctuary remained silent. The silence felt victorious. But here is the truth no one says out loud. Silence can signal peace, or it can signal fear. The difference is revealed over time. Jalen stood stiffly beside Keisha, smile tight but present. He looked calm, composed, but deep inside, something unsettled lingered, like a splinter beneath skin you can't quite locate. He told himself this was right. He told himself peace was better than passion. He told himself love could grow where approval already existed. And sometimes it can, but only if honesty lives there too. The vows were exchanged, rings slid into place, applause filled the room. Vanessa's eyes glistened, not with sadness this time, but triumph. She leaned toward a church mother and whispered, "God corrects what doesn't fit." But here is another lesson. When you confuse control with correction, you may end up correcting yourself into disaster. The reception was modest but cheerful. Fried chicken, rice, greens, and sweet tea lined folding tables in the fellowship hall. Keisha moved gracefully from guest to guest, hugging elders, thanking relatives, smiling for photos. Every gesture felt intentional. Every word felt measured. "Mama, I'm so grateful you guided us," Keisha said sweetly, squeezing Vanessa's hand. "I promise I'll honor this family." Vanessa felt her heart swell. Honor, respect, submission. Everything she believed Naomi lacked was standing right in front of her. What she did not see, what she could not see, was the quiet calculation behind Keisha's careful charm. Because not every strategy is loud. Some are patient. Some are polite. Some wear lace and carry Bibles. As the evening ended and guests departed, Vanessa stood in the now empty fellowship hall, surveying the room with satisfaction. Her son was married. The house of Carter was restored. The embarrassment of the first wedding had been erased by this one. At least, that's what she believed. But restoration that begins with comparison does not end with peace. It ends with competition. And while Vanessa celebrated her victory, something else had already begun. The foundation of her household had shifted, not dramatically, not visibly, but quietly. And quiet shifts are the most dangerous ones of all. At first, it was almost invisible. No slammed doors, no raised voices, no dramatic confrontations, just small adjustments, so minor they felt harmless. Keisha began organizing the household finances to help Jalen focus on work. She created spreadsheets, opened a joint savings account, suggested consolidating bills for efficiency. Jalen agreed. It sounded responsible. Vanessa nodded approvingly. A wife who manages well is a blessing. And that is how control often enters, through responsibility. The most dangerous changes are the ones that look like improvements. Sunday dinners slowly changed. Where Vanessa once commanded the kitchen, Keisha now offered to cook. At first, it felt respectful. "Let Mama rest," she would say sweetly. "You've done enough for this family." The church mothers praised her humility, but humility can be a performance when applause is the goal. Soon the recipes shifted. The seasonings tasted different. The portions were smaller. Keisha began rearranging cabinets for better flow. She replaced Vanessa's curtains with modern panels. "Just updating things," she smiled. Updating. Such an innocent word. Yet Vanessa began to feel like a guest in her own home. The corrections started subtly too. When Vanessa shared family stories at gatherings, Keisha would gently interrupt. "Oh, Mama, that's not exactly how Jalen told it, but close." Always smiling, always polite. Correcting. In public. Jalen noticed but said nothing, because silence had become his habit, and habits grow roots if you water them long enough. Keisha also encouraged distance. "Your old friends don't really understand married life," she told Jalen softly one evening. "We need couples who support our vision." Vision, another beautiful word hiding sharp edges. Gradually, phone calls slowed, invitations were declined, visits became rare. Vanessa dismissed the discomfort rising in her chest. She's protecting her marriage, she reasoned. But protection that isolates is not protection. It is positioning. The financial conversations grew deeper. Keisha suggested transferring the house deed into both her and Jalen's names to simplify future planning. She spoke of investments, insurance policies, long-term security. Vanessa hesitated for a brief moment, but pride whispered louder than caution. "You chose her. Trust her." And so she did, because admitting doubt would mean admitting she may have misjudged Naomi, and pride resists mirrors. One evening, after dinner, Vanessa overheard Keisha on the phone in the hallway. Her tone was different, firmer, colder. "Yes, everything is aligning, just a little more time." Vanessa stepped closer, but the call ended quickly. When Keisha turned, her smile returned instantly. "Mama, did you need something?" Soft, sweet, unbothered. Vanessa forced a nod and walked away. And here is another lesson. When your spirit raises a red flag, but your pride lowers it, you are volunteering for your own lesson. The house remained calm. Too calm. No explosions, no arguments, no obvious chaos. But beneath the polished floors and polite smiles, something had shifted. Ownership felt different. Authority felt diluted. Control felt distributed. And while Vanessa assured herself that everything was fine, the quiet rearrangement of power continued. Because some storms do not announce themselves with thunder. Some begin with a whisper and wait patiently for the right moment to roar. By the second year of Jalen's marriage, the Carter home no longer sounded the same. It wasn't louder, it was quieter. And quiet can be deceiving. The Sunday dinners that once stretched into laughter and storytelling now ended promptly after dessert. The television stayed off. The music that used to hum softly in the kitchen had disappeared. Keisha preferred order, and order, in her definition, meant control. She began setting new house standards. Guests were to call before visiting, finances were discussed privately, family matters were not to be shared outside the home. "That's how healthy marriages thrive," she would say, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. Healthy, another word that can wear a mask. Isolation does not begin with walls. It begins with suggestions. Jalen's phone buzzed less and less. Old friends stopped inviting him to basketball games. His college roommates' calls went unanswered so many times they eventually stopped coming. When Vanessa mentioned it, Keisha responded gently. They weren't pouring into him, they were distractions. As if community were clutter to be cleared away. Jalen convinced himself she was right. After all, married life required focus, sacrifice, alignment. He told himself distance was maturity, but maturity without accountability becomes captivity. Keisha now handled all statements and passwords. She assured Jalen she was keeping things organized. Investments were moved, accounts restructured, credit lines expanded for opportunity. Vanessa felt a subtle tightening in her chest whenever paperwork appeared. "Shouldn't I review this?" she once asked, carefully. Keisha smiled, soft and patient. "Oh, Mama, it's already handled. I'm protecting us." Protection. There it was again. And here is another lesson. When someone insists on controlling everything for your good, ask yourself who benefits most. Small humiliations began creeping in. During a church gathering, Vanessa offered an opinion about a family trip. Keisha laughed lightly. "Mama, we've already decided that's not practical." We've. Not you, not Jalen. We. Vanessa felt the sting but swallowed it. Pride tastes bitter, but it refuses to spit itself out. One afternoon, Vanessa attempted to use the joint family card for groceries. Declined. She tried again. Declined. Her hands trembled slightly as she stepped aside in line. When she returned home, Keisha was waiting. "Oh, Mama, we've had to restructure things. It's better if spending flows through me now." Flows. As if Vanessa were a tributary feeding into someone else's river. Jalen stood nearby, uneasy, but silent. And that silence roared louder than any argument. Here is the truth that settled heavily in that living room. A man who refuses to lead does not eliminate leadership. He simply allows someone else to take it. The House of Carter was still standing, but the authority within it had shifted completely, and storms that begin in silence rarely end that way. The collapse did not come with shouting. It came with paperwork. A thick envelope sat on the kitchen table one Tuesday morning, cream-colored and official. Jalen assumed it was another financial document Keisha had handled. It wasn't. It was a divorce filing. Irreconcilable differences. Asset division attached. Property claims outlined. By the time Jalen finished reading the first page, his hands were shaking. Keisha stood across the room, composed, calm, almost bored. "We've grown apart," she said evenly. "It's best to move forward efficiently." Efficiently, as if dismantling a marriage were a scheduling adjustment. Some people don't explode your life. They disassemble it, piece by piece, until there is nothing left to recognize. The numbers came next. Savings, drained. Credit cards, maxed. Loans, taken out against shared property. The house deed, legally amended 2 years prior, now gave Keisha significant leverage. Jalen felt like he had woken up inside someone else's mistake. "How?" he whispered. Keisha's expression did not change. "You signed everything willingly." And that was true. He had. Because trust without verification becomes vulnerability. Vanessa sat in the living room clutching a folder of statements she barely understood. Her name appeared on fewer and fewer documents. Her access had quietly evaporated. The house she once ruled now felt like rented space. Keisha walked through it confidently, already speaking to a realtor on the phone. "Yes, I'll be keeping the primary share. It's all documented." Documented. There is power in ink when you ignore the fine print. Jalen tried to argue. He raised his voice for the first time in months. "You planned this." Keisha tilted her head slightly. "I prepared. That's different." Prepared. That word landed heavier than accusation, because preparation requires intention, and intention requires strategy. Vanessa's chest tightened as realization began clawing through her pride. This was not sudden. This had been built carefully. The finances, the isolation, the control, the corrections, all bricks, all deliberate. When you remove someone for being too strong, you may replace them with someone who is simply more strategic. Then came the sentence Vanessa never imagined hearing in her own home. "Mama, you'll need to make arrangements. This property will be restructured. It's no longer practical for you to stay." No longer practical. The same woman Vanessa once defended against imaginary disorder was now dismissing her with contractual precision. The mirror had turned. 2 years ago, Vanessa stood in a sanctuary and declared someone unfit. Now she stood in her living room being told she no longer fit. The karma loop had closed. Jalen sank into a chair, face buried in his hands. For the first time, he understood the cost of silence. For the first time, Vanessa understood the cost of pride. The house felt smaller that afternoon, not physically, but spiritually, because authority built on ego cannot survive accountability. And while Keisha moved efficiently through the next steps of her departure, lawyers, listings, timelines, Vanessa sat still, still enough to hear the echo of her own voice from 2 years ago. This woman is not prepared to be a Carter wife. She had been wrong, not about Naomi's strength, but about Keisha's softness. Because sometimes the storm you fear looks loud and obvious, and sometimes the real destruction arrives smiling, organized, and fully prepared. The moving boxes arrived on a Thursday afternoon. Brown, plain, unforgiving. They stacked neatly against the living room wall, the same wall where Vanessa once displayed framed family portraits and church awards. Now those frames sat wrapped in newspaper, fragile and displaced. No congregation watched this time. No choir hummed softly in the background. Just silence. And silence, when earned, sounds different. Vanessa folded her dresses carefully into a suitcase. The hat she wore the day she objected at the wedding rested in her lap for a long moment before she placed it gently inside a box. When you defend a decision more than you examine it, you are protecting your ego, not your peace. Keisha's realtor entered briefly to assess the property. Professional, efficient, detached. Vanessa stepped aside as they discussed square footage and listing prices. Square footage, as if legacy could be measured in dimensions. The house of Carter, once filled with authority and tradition, was now reduced to market value. And Vanessa felt the sting of realization settle fully into her spirit. She had mistaken compliance for character. She had mistaken softness for sincerity. She had mistaken control for protection. And she had mistaken silence for strength. The mirror was clear now, unforgiving. That evening, Vanessa sat alone on the edge of her packed bed. The room echoed slightly, stripped of decoration. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to say Naomi's name out loud. Naomi. It did not burn. It did not taste bitter. It felt honest. She thought about the young woman standing at the altar 2 years ago, dignified even in humiliation, strong without being cruel, confident without being manipulative. Strength had never been the enemy. Threat only lived in Vanessa's imagination. An imagination, when fueled by insecurity, can create disasters that reality never intended. As the sun dipped lower outside the window, Vanessa whispered a prayer. Not for restoration, not for revenge, but for clarity. Because clarity is what pride steals first, and humility is what suffering often returns. The house was no longer hers, but the lesson was. And sometimes, losing walls is the only way to finally see the truth reflected back at you. Charlotte felt different from Raleigh. Faster, louder, less concerned with tradition and more concerned with movement. Vanessa sat in her parked car outside Naomi's apartment complex, hands gripping the steering wheel the same way Naomi once had on her wedding day. Full circle moments rarely feel poetic. They feel uncomfortable. The building stood tall and modern. Glass balconies, coded entry, clean landscaping. It reflected independence, stability, growth. Everything Vanessa once mistrusted. Sometimes the strength you fear in others is the strength you secretly wish you had. Naomi opened the door wearing tailored slacks and a soft blue blouse. Her hair was neatly styled, her posture steady. There was no bitterness in her face, just calm. That calm unsettled Vanessa more than anger ever could. "Mrs. Carter," Naomi said evenly. Not "Mama," not with warmth, but not with hostility either, just distance. Vanessa swallowed. "I won't take much of your time," she began. Her voice, once firm and declarative, now carried weight. "I came to apologize." The word hung between them. Apologize. No scripture attached, no justification wrapped around it. No, if you felt hurt. Just responsibility. Naomi's eyes searched her face carefully, as if verifying authenticity. "For what?" Naomi asked quietly. Vanessa inhaled deeply. "For humiliating you, for confusing control with protection, for believing that your independence meant you would dishonor my son." Her voice cracked slightly. "For teaching him that silence was acceptable." There it was. Ownership. Accountability is not proven by tears. It is proven by clarity. Naomi stepped aside and allowed Vanessa to enter. The apartment was peaceful, minimalistic but warm. A framed certificate of promotion hung near the dining area. Fresh flowers sat on the table, evidence of rebuilding. "I went to therapy," Naomi said gently, "not because I was broken, but because I needed to understand why I tolerated silence." Vanessa nodded slowly. Pain produced growth here, not bitterness, growth. "I thought I was protecting my family, but I was protecting my pride." Naomi held her gaze. "Yes," she said softly, "you were." The honesty did not wound. It healed. They sat across from each other for a long moment. Vanessa continued. "The woman I chose, she dismantled everything. The house, the finances, Jalen's confidence." Naomi did not smile, did not gloat, because maturity does not celebrate someone else's lesson. It recognizes it. "I'm sorry that happened," she said sincerely. And that sincerity cut deeper than accusation ever could. Forgiveness is not forgetting what happened. It is choosing not to let it control who you become. Finally, Naomi spoke words Vanessa never expected to hear. "I forgive you." Not quickly, not casually, but deliberately. "I forgive you because I deserve peace, and holding anger would only chain me to that day." Vanessa felt something loosen inside her chest, something tight and rigid, finally releasing. Forgiveness is a gift, but it is not always given for the offender. Sometimes it is given for the survivor. As Vanessa stood to leave, she paused at the doorway. "You were never misaligned," she said softly. "I was." Naomi gave a small, knowing nod. And in that quiet Charlotte apartment, something finally shifted. Not the past, not the consequences, but the understanding. Because humility does not erase damage. It simply ensures the damage was not wasted. And sometimes, the greatest restoration is not a returned house, but a restored perspective. Time has a way of slowing down when lessons finally settle. Months passed. The Carter house was sold, the proceeds divided according to legal agreements that did not favor nostalgia. Jalen moved into a modest apartment across town, smaller, quieter, humbling. Vanessa rented a one-bedroom condominium near her church. No grand dining room, no long hallway of achievements, just enough space for essentials. Stripped-down living has a way of stripping down ego. When everything unnecessary is removed, you finally see what was truly holding you up. Jalen began therapy, not because someone forced him, but because silence had cost him too much. He unpacked years of conflict avoidance, years of believing that keeping peace meant keeping quiet. He realized something painful. He had not lost Naomi because of his mother. He had lost Naomi because of himself. A man who refuses to lead will eventually be led, and not always somewhere good. That understanding did not crush him, it strengthened him, because accountability, though heavy, builds muscle. Vanessa returned to Sunday services with a quieter spirit. She no longer corrected young couples when they shared opinions, no longer inserted herself into private matters disguised as guidance. When a church mother once whispered, "You were right to protect your son back then," Vanessa shook her head gently. "No," she replied. "I was afraid. Afraid of losing influence, afraid of irrelevance, afraid that independence meant exclusion. And fear, when dressed up as tradition, becomes dangerous." Meanwhile, Naomi continued building her life in Charlotte. Her promotion expanded into leadership opportunities. She mentored young women navigating relationships and careers. She spoke openly about boundaries, not bitterly, but wisely. She did not tell her story for revenge. She told it for clarity, because clarity is what breaks cycles. One Sunday afternoon, months after the apology, Jalen called Naomi, not to rekindle, not to persuade, but to thank her. "For teaching me what I refuse to learn," he said simply. Growth sounds different from regret. It sounds steadier. And while they did not reunite romantically, they left the conversation lighter than they entered it. Closure is not always reconciliation. Sometimes it is understanding. Now, let's step outside the story for a moment. This was never just about a wedding objection. It was about control disguised as protection. It was about silence masquerading as peace. It was about how easily we confuse compliance with character. Vanessa believed she was replacing weakness with virtue, but she replaced strength with strategy. And strategy without integrity steals more than money. It steals stability. Tradition without love becomes tyranny. Silence in the face of wrong becomes agreement, and pride, when left unchallenged, will build the very storm it fears. The monster in this story did not enter through force. She was welcomed, praised, defended, and empowered. But monsters do not thrive alone. They thrive where discernment is asleep. So ask yourself, are you protecting love or protecting control? Are you keeping peace or avoiding courage? Because sometimes the blessing you reject is not removed to punish you. It is removed to reveal you. And sometimes losing everything is the only way to finally understand what truly mattered all along.